Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. The Disruptance Podcast is the show that disrupts the way entrepreneurs think to make them more profitable and impactful. Rethink tired and outdated business norms to welcome innovation and unlock your unlimited possibilities. Here are your hosts, Eric Forney and Greg Fowler.
All right, Eric. So today we've got a different episode. We jumped on before recording here, and this is going to be a pop question round. So you have no idea what these questions are.
So it's kind of like you're like Regis Philbin today, right?
And there you go. I can do that.
Okay.
I've been called worse. So we can go down the line. Whatever pops into your head, though, as it's stated into here, Eric, and then we'll go down any rabbit holes. I think this will be interesting, too. We'll get a lot of insight into that mind of yours and really just a lot of takeaways for everybody out there. So you ready to dive in?
We have no other choice. It's going to be this one might be rated NC-17 or something. I don't know. We'll see.
That's all right. Our audience loves it. You know, at the end of the day, it's all about that. So let's go into question number one. So I'm going off of this. What's your biggest failure, and what did you learn from that experience? And I guess you could take that into consideration, what you considered your biggest failure, or what failure meant to you, and what you learned from it.
Gosh, it's a good question, but the reality of it is I don't remember. And it's not as though I've not failed at something. Mm-hmm. I just rarely reflect on the past. And sure. I also think in isolation that it's that considering something a failure without considering the like ancillary consequences or the ancillary blessings and opportunities that come as a byproduct of that negates seeing things in a holistic manner. And so are there things that I've certainly not achieved my desired goal or outcome? Absolutely. Okay. Did I gain something as a byproduct of it? For sure. But I waste little to no time reflecting and marinating on failures or missed opportunity from a goal standpoint. And so I don't know the answer, Greg.
Gotcha. No,
how about you?
That's a fair question. I guess, you spinning it back on me, as I'm thinking about it, one thing stands out, and there's been a multitude of failures just as the same as you're discussing on my end. I mean, I fail all the time. And when I say that, I think that if you're not trying hard enough, there's no opportunity for you to actually stumble. And I think that that's an important lesson. Take it away from that thought. But as I reflect on it, early on in my business, there was assumptions that were made based off of certain processes of the client. And what I mean by that is business was built predicated off of, hey, my client at the end of the day is going to fulfill this end result. They don't need us for that. They're good. No need. So our product and service stopped at that point. Well, the interesting thing is I was completely wrong. And the failure behind it wasn't yielding the result that I initially intended. So without really taking a step back at it and say, hey, this really isn't what I'm trying to accomplish. And my assumption was that it would, but it didn't. So what I learned from it is just don't assume and really have a deeper understanding of who your target audience is and what their capabilities, strengths, or weaknesses are to better serve them and have better results. I guess that's how I take it from that question. Biggest failure comes to mind.
Yeah. What I heard you say is the same thing that the same challenge I've had is get in business with the wrong people, do business with the wrong people, hire the wrong people. It almost always boils down to that. I mean, every failure is to a large degree is nothing more than some combination of that. But I go back to, I learned that lesson. It's impossible to go through life without it realizing that lesson by failing your way through it. I did a rendition of our podcast 3 episodes ago about wealth building, and one of the most costly things you can do is who you hire.
Wow,
and that's probably most failures in life, and certainly in business, can be attributed to that. Who you marry, lots of those things.
But I think that you're breaking that down in a way that the audience can consume it, Eric. I mean, again, interesting to reflect on it. And I would tell everybody who's tuning into this too, if you want to, in the comments section, depending on where you're consuming this, if it's audio file or on social platforms,
Craigslist.
Let everybody know, hey, what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from it? Give us, comments, get some feedback. We'd love to hear what you've gone through. So number 2, Eric, this I know is right up your alley when it comes down to it in lots of different forms or fashions. What is your favorite book of all time? And what is the biggest takeaway? And when I say book, I also put in parentheses or podcast.
Okay.
Or if it ends up being, I want to say book, podcast, or YouTube channel, YouTube video. Like what is your favorite piece of content that you've consumed? And what was your biggest takeaway?
Okay.
That's a tough one.
Gosh, I needed these ahead of time. No. So, I mean, we've talked about it, but if I just had to read like one book, just one life book, this is my Naval, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant book. There it is. See,
look at this. We're two different states here, Eric. Look at this. And you've got the same book right next to you here, man. This is because of you, by the way. The audience, but Eric, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
yeah.
Eric turned me onto this. I haven't moved forward. I got a couple other things that jumped in my way, but I'm 73 pages in. This thing is incredible. And I've dog-eared more than half of the first 73 pages. I take notes, I dog-ear. Incredible book. Didn't mean to cut you off, Eric, but yeah.
No, it's such a good book. So it's probably like book one if I were going to only get to choose one. If I were putting together like an additional list, I probably would put on there like how to talk so that kids will listen, how to listen so that kids will talk. I would probably throw I like this book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. It's a lot about understanding human behavior and the way to package different, what I consider to be like leadership and business related content from an understanding human behavior and trying to get people to do what they want to do and what you need them to do in order to accomplish what they want. And then, of course, you can't go through and not talk about the Gary Keller book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. Of course, if you only could read one real estate book, and I got to be really honest, that's the only real estate book I've ever read. So I don't know that there's another one that you need to read. And probably some sales book. I would pick Gap Selling.
Okay. Now, out of all those that you gave, because there's incredible books out of there, what was your biggest takeaway from any of those? What if somebody said, Eric, gosh, you gave so many incredible books and, I'm going to take a look at all of them, but what was your biggest takeaway? What can I look forward to when I dive into that one book? What would you say?
Yeah, man, if I were going to distill the Naval Ravikant book down, it boils down to my best lessons probably are that you productize yourself. You make a lifetime of income based on your judgment and on your history of accountability, that you play long-term games with long-term people.
I think that's beautiful. And again, life lessons. And that's the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, not sponsored, even though, hey, just in case if that ever happens.
It's actually free there's a digital version for free too on the website. So
that'd be cool. We'd have to put something in the show notes, but I think that'd be definitely worth looking at and taking a go through. As I think about that question, Eric, and people ask that kind of question. It's pretty common, quite a bit. Kind of what's your favorite book, and everybody's got their answer. I think ultimately it evolves as time goes on. Some people that are tuning into this, obviously they're podcasters, so they don't read, they listen more so. So I think that takes into category. If you like to read, if you like to listen, if you like to watch, or a combination, it doesn't matter as long as you're consuming it. Some people actually learn best through engagement interaction. So mentorships or relationships that you have in life, I think are massive ways for you to obviously learn and to grow. But sticking to this, I'll move my head slightly for anybody who can see. So where my finger is right now, this happens to be one of my all-time favorite books.
So that's not a virtual background. Okay.
It is not a virtual background. These are actual books. I've read most of them at least once, if not more.
You're like Ron Burgundy. I feel like all these large leather-bound books behind you.
That's right. Only could be too cool. I got that mustache though is very impressive.
That's
that takes a serious man. But this book right here, When to Jump by Mike Lewis.
Okay.
Incredible book for entrepreneurs.
What am I going to get from that? When to Jump.
Yeah, When to Jump. I'm a big fan because I think it goes through the psychological profile of so many different people from perspectives and lives and walks and what makes them make decisions to move forward as an entrepreneur. To distill down the major takeaways, I mean, it seems quite simple and obvious. There's never a right time to take a jump. No matter how much money you have in the bank account, no matter how many relationships you have, no matter how much knowledge you have, there's always time for you to say and convince yourself that you should wait a little bit longer, have a little bit more money, have a little bit more knowledge, have a little bit more relationships before you take that leap, leaving the 9 to 5, leaving the gilded cage in a lot of corporate America standpoint and go into full entrepreneurialism. That is a beautiful book because it gives you so many different people from so many different occupations and age ranges that made the jump and what they were thinking about. And I remember the first time that I actually read that, I was listening to it and I was, doing my daily walks as I was listening. And there were so many instances where like, wow, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm feeling the same thing. And this was me coming from, corporate America, making a healthy 6-figure income, prior to opening up my own shop for digital marketing. And, it was really interesting to kind of note and carry those thoughts. I mean, everybody has those feelings and emotions. I think that'll help. If you're thinking about doing something great and, shifting and changing your life, that'll be a book that would help you out. I'd love for anybody else's thought process, favorite books, favorite podcast. Put comments down below, chime in with us. We'd love to see what your thoughts are. Having a list of that from the Disruptance audience should be pretty powerful. Any other thoughts on that, Eric, before we jump in?
What I heard you say was you were trying to talk me into quitting my job. So, I think we'll
read the book first.
Oh, got it. Okay.
There you go.
Okay, cool. When to jump. Got it. Okay.
That's right. That's the idea into that standpoint. You'll figure it out. Anybody who's listening, they'll hear it. They'll know it. Question number 3 out of the pop question episode here. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be? So this is a morbid question, right? So Eric, you're dead. You're dead. You're gone. The world no longer is lucky enough to have you physically in their presence, minus AI, minus any artificial intelligence.
That's right.
If you could be remembered for one thing by everybody you leave behind on this planet, what would it be?
Probably being authentic, my guess. That's not it probably seems like a cop-out answer, and yet the reality is that everything else is temporary. I mean, we don't even remember the Roman emperors that fought at the Colosseum and cheered for the fans and the gladiators who escaped alive. Why will they remember me? We can't remember the 10 commandments. We can hardly remember what we ate for breakfast today. And so to be anything other than probably authentically me is just hopeful, is just hoping that somehow life is more significant than it is. And I don't mean that in a depressing way either, by the way. I think that's a freeing concept.
I like the answer to that question. I don't think it's a cop-out, Eric. To be truly authentic in nature. I mean, imagine you're gone and people that have known you say, you know what, that Eric guy, super authentic. Every time I had a conversation with him, I knew what I was getting. It wasn't filtered. It was what you see is what you get. Stand-up sort of characteristics. There are worse things to be remembered by in that opposite nature. I mean, I don't know about
there is Jeffrey Dahmer. We do remember Jeffrey Dahmer. So there definitely are worse things, Greg.
There is true. And there's a Netflix show or series on it. Actually very creepy and interesting. I don't know if you caught it, but
no, we watched one episode and the missus was like, I think we're good. I think we've learned enough about Dahmer at this point. We can probably just stop.
It definitely is an inner working to the psyche of that individual, to each their own as you continue down that journey. We're not recommending that here on Disruptance, but interesting nonetheless. I would say that I don't know about the 10 Commandments, but I do remember that I had chocolate pancakes for breakfast with rainbow sprinkles.
Me too.
So, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Very good.
Table at our house on the weekends.
I was going to say, when you've got a little, there's definitely the room for
cinnamon rolls or chocolate chip pancakes. That's the rotation in this household on a weekend.
Big fan. That's a class act right there, Eric. The authenticity that's there. That's going to be. That's what you should have said. Cinnamon rolls and pancakes. That's the one thing I want to be remembered for. Yeah, right. That's an interesting question to me. I never really thought about that in depth. The first thing that jumps out of my mind, I guess is kindness.
Okay.
If I was gone, really thinking about the way that I make others feel, I've always kind of prided myself into a nature to walk into a room and just add a level of energy to it. So I don't know if it's energetic or, sunshine and rainbows that kind of beams out when I'm around. But to me, I would love for people to think, man, every time Greg came into a room, it was warmer. It was just more exciting and inviting. I think that would be a pretty cool thing to be remembered by, just the warm fuzzies that people feel when you're around. Off the top of my head, I'm sure there's more dynamic things that we could answer and say, giants of industry and, other aspects like that to be remembered by, but I don't know. I like our answers, Eric.
I'm going with, I think kindness is a great answer. Okay. I just don't think anyone will remember me for that, Greg. So I just, I'd like to, but it's just not probable. So
it depends on who you talk to, I suppose, Eric. I'm sure there's a small circle somewhere. I don't know where it is.
Hopefully my son and my wife will think of that part.
It's there. I tried drawing a small circle, but it looked more like a heart. There you go. There's a small circle somewhere. It's out there. Anybody who's watching, they saw it. So here's number 4, Eric, which question number 4, this one could be interesting. Not a time machine sort of question, but maybe it is. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be? So, and here's how I'd want to preface this question. It's not to go back and say, do this so that you don't lose a finger because you're hammering nails. It's not to change what's going on, but what advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you could go back in any form or fashion? What would it be?
Most of what you do doesn't matter. Show up and own everything that you do like it matters. But remember that almost everything that you'll ever devote your time to doesn't matter. It's temporary. Your circumstances, your activities, your friends, your relationships, most of them are fleeting and temporary. They don't matter in the grand arc of life, and yet treat them all as though they matter. Don't dwell on them, though, for anything more.
Look, I got to say huge advice. And I love those travel back questions, again, not to change those things, but to really give perspective on what we could do now. That advice that you're giving, Eric, is true to today. There's a time frame of if it's not going to affect you in 5 years or 5 months, then don't worry about it, sort of thing. I think most of the trouble with people is that they're more concerned about what's actually going to happen, and it doesn't end up happening. Or a much lesser effect of what it is. I think that's sound advice coming through and through. But it is an interesting thought to kind of look and reflect back on that. How would you, if you could, let me rephrase the question then, because I actually like this. So if you could really look back at and then go when let's just say you're sitting on a rocker. And Eric's out on the front porch, 80, 90 some odd year old Eric. And what would be some of the things that you would reflect back on and possibly tell yourself that you're glad that you did? I don't want to say things that you regret, because everybody goes, if you're sitting back and you're in your deathbed, you're going to think about the things you regret not doing. What would be something that you'd be proud of yourself by the time you're at that age that you ended up doing, Eric? Let's say you have a crystal ball and you can kind of see where things are going down the line. because you know how you are. You know
Yeah.
your behavior.
I mean, it's probably like, um, gosh, I don't know. I hope I hope that it's to show up. You know, Warren Buffett has this. I'm going to steal from Warren Buffett, and I'm going to screw the quote up a little bit, but you'll get the gist of it. And it's the idea that, like, at 80 years old, when you look back on your life, wealth and happiness are determined by, do the people that you want to like you and love you still like and love you?
Hmm.
And if they do, then you've lived a healthy and wealthy life. If not, then you haven't. And so that I think would be the thing to then reflect on is, have I ostracized everyone that I wish would still like me and still have been involved at some point in time and been miserable or been lonely as a byproduct of that? If so, I probably screwed a lot up along the way. If not, then I've done as much as I can. You know, there's this theory that that I kind of subscribe to about life, and it's this, you know, the theory of randomness. And you know, we saw it especially in 2020 during the pandemic, Greg. And what, you know, you could have been running a Michelin 5-star restaurant, and then along comes your blue state, and they shut everything that you've been doing successfully down. And what we know is that the average restaurant in America had $1,400 worth of cash on hand. And so you could have had an amazing business, and all of a sudden, what seems like randomness wipes out what was an amazing business and what you've dedicated your entire adult life to building. And so there are too many outside randomized components of life that show up and deplete us of what we think are our goals and of the outcomes that we're attempting to achieve, or the people that we want to be in relationship with, you know. And so we've just put way too much emphasis and over index on this idea of control. At the end of the day, what we have is so very little control over so little. Hell, at 80, we won't even have control of our bowels. And so we should lose sight of the fact that we're solely responsible for whatever our life looks like at 80, because we have very little to do with the outcome. The only thing we have to do is over a small 3-foot radius of things that we can control about ourselves up to a point, and everything else is subject to the theory of randomness.
You know, Eric, it's interesting that you mention it, you know, talking about age. And, you know, there's that quote that's thrown around quite a bit. And who knows who originally said it? I don't.
It's probably Aaliyah. It's age is just a number. It was Aaliyah. Definitely Aaliyah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You know, and well, I thought it was, it could have been TLC, what is Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. That's a whole nother,
one of the two.
Whole nother story that way. But I think that it's not so much the years of life, but the life in the years sort of thing. You know, Steve Jobs passed away at 57, pancreatic cancer. Was it pancreatic? No.
Yeah, sounds right.
Okay. It was either pancreatic or no, colon cancer. One of the two. One of the two. And it was interesting. I saw this article, and he was super skinny, you know, 58 years old. He was being held up by one of his buddies. You know, passed away a multi-billionaire at 57 years of age. Now, arguably cut short, right? Short life, 57 years. You know, I'm not too far away. I look to that and you think, okay, well, it could happen to anybody at any time. But he accomplished so much in that period of time that he was here on this planet. So again, it's, you know, I don't know if the 80, 90-year-old thing is a goal for me. I mean, I'd be lucky to make it there, personally. I don't necessarily need to live this long forever just because you're around life. I think that at the end of the day, it should be impactful. I think that, you know, you should leave your mark in some form or fashion. And even if it's in a micro scale of just your family, your close loved ones, that continues a legacy onto that, I think is interesting. You know, that going back into the question of advising your 18-year-old self, you know, it is a funny thing. I going into it, I would tell my 18-year-old self, don't be so cheap and buy a nice bed sooner. I think, you know, one of the best investments.
Were you sleeping on a bamboo mat or something? I mean, what are we doing?
I mean, we're talking about, you know, what do they call futons? I was a futon guy, horrible. And I'll tell you, this is not a sponsored plug, but, you know, I'm a Sleep Number guy. Okay. I mean, I will tell anybody on the planet I mean, for me, I sleep no better than on that bed. Go all out, spend the money on a good mattress. You spend a third of your life on that thing. Food for thought.
Hey,
So
I like the advice. So the 18-year-old advice is buy a good mattress
yes, that's it.
and get a car that chicks dig.
That's
Those
right,
two
man.
are good 18-year-old advices. I
Life's
agree.
too short. Otherwise, the rest of it's just going to go right over the 18-year-old Greg. The 18-year-old Greg, that's a funny thing. Eric, here's another question. Would the 18-year-old Eric make fun of the present Eric today?
Oh, of course.
I
always say 18-year-old Eric would punch Eric in the face today, because the things that I complain about today are the things that I want, that I never thought I would ever have, let alone certainly complain about.
I love it, man. I love it. And that would be a funny thing to go back and kind of poke fun at our younger and older selves. That's such a funny thought to go through. Maybe that's something AI can do. Maybe AI
right.
can
I hope
make
so.
that happen going through. So here's the next question, Eric. This one's a deeper one. Believe it or not, we're even going deeper than where we've already gone. So I kind of like these pop questions here. You can pick or choose anything inside here. What I put down was, tell me about the 3 most influential people in your life and how they impacted you. Now, you don't have to say 3. You can just break it down to 1. So if you break it down to 1, who's the most influential person that's been in your life, and really how did they impact you, if you wanted to be kind of specific into that?
Man,
deep question.
You're making this difficult here to pick one.
Well, you can do 3. You can do 3. I originally put it, but
I would have to pick, I guess, in no order. I would probably have to say my mother, my son, and my wife.
Okay.
I think those are the accurate answers.
Okay.
Let's see. My mom is like my biggest fan, probably still to this day, probably more than my child and wife, even though they're like they're part-time fans. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I got you.
But mom's at least full-time fan.
Yeah,
and so probably mom for always being consistent and dependable, and someone who will be known for kindness. And then my son, because gosh, I don't know, man, is there anything better than having little kids? And there's not something that I wanted. That hasn't been a secret, right? Like better yet, it wasn't something I had planned for or was like on the roadmap of life. And yet it's the best thing to happen. And then of course, Lauren, because I'm a lot more bearable and to be around today as a byproduct of her. She always says that I was a little intense when we first met, and so maybe a little regimented. I'd wake up at 4:40 in the morning and do everything like I was David Goggins, and today not so much. And owe a lot of that to her, to bring that perspective to life, and just to observe how she's able to still be wildly successful in life and have an entirely different approach. She just sees the world very differently, and yet still makes a lot of amazing things happen simultaneously.
Wow. It's, not diminishing mom and your son, huge, but when you talk about somebody who is like Lauren, who is kind of refined certain aspects and evolved Eric to a different spot, that's a big thing. That's a big thing. I think it's important to have that reflection, I guess, for appreciation of those individuals. Luckily for some of us, those most influential people in our lives are still with us. And this was a conversation that I had with a buddy the other day, and it's sad. And then I kind of got irritated a little bit. People pass away every day. People die every day. It's just kind of a part of things. And what I notice, and I don't know if you notice this too, Eric, when somebody does pass, you see social feeds flood. Oh, love them, rest in peace. Whether they're celebrities or politicians or business professionals or just true loved ones, close friends and family into local community. And it always begs the question to me, yes, it's sad. And like all these people come out of the woodwork. And I'm just curious if do all those people tell that person when they were around how much they care, how much they love, how much they change them? And that, I guess that's an irritation of mine, but also a reflection to say, hey, look, well, do the people that I love that impact me in my life, do I thank them? Do I tell them I love them? Do I spend, so I guess for the fortunate few if you're answering these questions along with Eric and I, put in the comments down below, please, through all these questions. But if you're 3 or 1 most influential person that's still alive with us today, ask yourself that question. Are you actually telling them how much you care, how much they influence, how much they've changed and evolved your life? The answer is no, you probably should. I take that very, very seriously that way. I don't know. Am I off base with that, Eric? I mean, any interesting thoughts?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, the reality is, that's a good idea to wrap on, because now I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to tell my wife, and I'm going to tell Hudson that's the case. Because no, the answer is that no matter what, I've said before, I create reminders for myself to do that. And even with the reminders, it's still not sufficient enough and frequent enough to tell those people. Absolutely not.
I love it. I love it, my friend. Well, Eric, that was kind of it. It was the quick 5 pop questions. It wasn't too crazy. Is there any that pop into your mind that you would want just to have captured for this episode? Any questions? You can project it to me.
Who would you have used as your lifeline if you struggled with any of those 5 questions, Greg? Who would you have called as your lifeline here on
That's an easy answer. I'm talking to the man right here. I mean, that's if you were available, okay. Eric. Cool. And the reason why it would be used because I knew you'd have an answer for it. I mean, the level
true.
Of information that is in your mind is awe-inspiring. The audience knows it. That's why you're all here. You're welcome for that. But no, yeah, I mean, I think I would call you in a heartbeat, Eric. I mean, the idea behind, really thinking about, and this kind of precursor to our last episode 14. Asking great questions. I think ultimately there's so many surface level types of conversations that happen every single day and on podcasts all over the world. Again, I mean, to me, quite frankly, you could there's a couple mediocre questions inside here, but some of these go deep and some of these are very specific into deep, emotional evoking questions that you should be having with others into your life, rethinking and reshaping the way that we have conversation. And you're excellent at that, Eric. So again, yeah, I would call you. Now, whether you'd answer or not is another thing. If I came up on your caller ID, I don't know if that would be there. I don't even know it's listed when that happens. Maybe you got to show me sometime.
My ringer's off, and most of the times on Do Not Disturb. So
immediately,
not just you, Greg, not you.
Oh, you're the best. You're the best, Eric. Well, hey, man, great episode as always. Loved it. And again, everybody who's tuning into it, please go through the questions, the 5 questions, chime in. We'd love to hear what you're thinking, what you're doing. Anything from the audience, we appreciate 100%. Anything you want to finish up with, Eric, before we wrap it up?
No, man, we hit it. Let's do it. Go out by the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. There we go. Now it's got 2 votes. There's no other option. You've got 2 resounding endorsements.
Love it. All right, Eric, you're the best. We'll catch you on the next one.